I'm Helen, 34 female. I live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in the city, a place I chose for its simplicity and proximity to my lab. For years, my life was my work as a biotech scientist, a quiet existence punctuated by breakthroughs and the hum of machinery. That all changed when I sold a patent for a revolutionary gene editing technique, a sale that instantly made me a multimillionaire. The story I'm about to tell you isn't about the joy of that success, but about how the people I trusted most saw it not as a shared blessing, but as their personal lottery ticket. It's a story about how my own mother and brother used my love and trust to orchestrate a breathtaking betrayal, culminating in them stealing over $5 million to buy a mansion for themselves. They thought I would just accept it, but they gravely miscalculated the line they were crossing. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My family wasn't wealthy growing up, but we were comfortable. My mother, Rebecca, was a high school history teacher who ran our household with meticulous order. My father, who passed away from a sudden heart attack when I was in college, was an engineer, quiet, steady, and the undisputed bedrock of our family. His loss was a cataclysm that reshaped our family's landscape. My mother, who had always been the disciplinarian, became more controlling, her anxiety manifesting as a need to manage every aspect of our lives. My younger brother, Jasper, who had always been the carefree artist, seemed to drift further, untethered from our father's grounding influence. I coped with his death by throwing myself into my studies and then my career. Science became my sanctuary, a world of logic and order that made sense when nothing else did. While Jasper sketched in notebooks and dreamed of becoming a famous graphic designer, I spent my nights in the lab, chasing hypotheses. My mother praised my dedication, but always with a caveat. "It's wonderful you're so smart, Helen," she'd say, "but don't forget your family. Don't let all that ambition make you forget who you are." Jasper never seemed to find his footing. His freelance design work was sporadic, and he lived at home with Mom well into his late 20s, contributing little and complaining often about the lack of inspiration in our suburban town. Mom enabled him, calling him a sensitive soul who just needed the right environment to flourish. She'd often call me to complain about his lack of motivation, only to defend him fiercely if I dared to agree with her. "He's your brother, Helen," she'd remind me. "Family has to support each other." And I did. I paid for his expensive design software, covered his car insurance, and sent Mom extra money every month to ease the burden. I never saw it as a handout. I saw it as my duty. After Dad died, I felt a profound responsibility to make sure Mom and Jasper were okay. I was the successful one, the one who had her life together. It only made sense that I would be the new bedrock. The day the money from the patent sale hit my account, my entire world tilted on its axis. The number was so large it felt unreal, an abstract concept rather than actual currency. My first thought wasn't about a new car or a lavish vacation. It was, Mom and Jasper are set for life. They'll never have to worry about money again. I sat them down in Mom's familiar living room, the one with the floral sofa and the framed photos of our family in happier times. I explained the sale, the numbers, and what it meant. Jasper's eyes were wide with a childlike glee, immediately talking about a new computer and a trip to Japan. Mom was quieter, her expression a mixture of pride and something else I couldn't quite decipher at the time, a calculating intensity. "This is incredible, Helen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be so proud." That evening, we talked about the future. I told them I wanted to set up a family trust, a fund that would provide for them comfortably for the rest of their lives. I also wanted to buy a new family home, a place where we could all live together if we wanted, a central hub for holidays and gatherings. A place that felt secure, like the home Dad had provided for us. "I want to put the house in a trust," I explained, "so it's protected and it will always be our family home." Mom nodded eagerly. "That's a wonderful idea, dear, but trusts and lawyers are so complicated. It all sounds so cold and formal. We're family. Why can't we just have a joint account for the house fund? That way, I can manage the search and the down payments while you're busy at the lab. It's simpler. It's based on trust. I hesitated. A joint account felt exposed. But looking at my mother's earnest face, the face of the woman who had raised me, who had earned with me, I felt a pang of guilt for my skepticism. She was right. We were family. What was the point of this incredible fortune if I couldn't share it freely with the people I loved most? My success was their success. That's what family meant. "You're right, Mom," I said, making the single most catastrophic financial decision of my life. "A joint account makes sense. I trust you completely." We opened the account the following week. I transferred a staggering $5 million into it, an amount earmarked specifically for a new family property and its furnishings. I made her a joint owner on the account, giving her full, unrestricted access. She was supposed to search for properties, consult with me on the finalists, and handle the preliminary paperwork. I was the funder. She was the project manager. It felt like a perfect partnership. For the first few weeks, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Mom would send me listings for beautiful homes, and we'd discuss the pros and cons over the phone. Jasper even seemed more engaged, offering his design opinions on layouts and aesthetics. He talked about building a state-of-the-art studio in the new house. I felt a deep sense of happiness, believing that this money was finally fixing the cracks in our family, bringing us closer together. I was so focused on building a new future that I failed to see they were building one entirely without me. The foundation of trust I thought we were standing on was, in reality, quicksand, and I was sinking fast. The house search, which began with collaborative energy, slowly started to change. Mom's calls became less frequent, and when I asked for updates, her answers grew vague. "I'm looking at a few promising options, dear," she'd say evasively. "I don't want to get your hopes up until I find the perfect one." Jasper, too, became distant. When I called him, he'd often say he was out with Mom or scoping out neighborhoods. They were a unit, and I was an outsider calling in for a status report. I tried to quell the unease creeping into my mind. I was incredibly busy at work, overseeing the implementation of my patented technology with the company that had bought it. The hours were long, and the pressure was immense. I rationalized my family's behavior as them trying to handle things so I wouldn't be bothered. They were being considerate, I told myself. They were taking the burden off my shoulders. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a complex data analysis when I got a text from my aunt, my mother's sister. It was a link to a local real estate blog with the headline, "Stunning 10-acre estate in Oak Valley sells for record price." The picture showed a sprawling, opulent mansion with a stone facade, a grand circular driveway, and a fountain that looked like it belonged at a European palace. It was ostentatious and completely unlike anything I would have ever chosen. Curious, I clicked the link. The article mentioned the property had been purchased by the Vance family. My blood ran cold. The Vance family? I scrolled down, my heart pounding in my chest. There it was. A picture from the realtor's social media page. Standing in front of the mansion, holding a sold sign, were my mother and my brother. They were beaming, arms around each other, looking triumphant. There was no sign of me. The caption read, "Congratulations to the Vance family on their magnificent new home. So excited for Rebecca and Jasper to start their new chapter here." My hands started to shake. I immediately tried calling my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I called Jasper. Same result. Panic began to set in. This wasn't a family home, this was their home. A home purchased without my final approval, without my input, without even my presence. I left the lab in a daze, driving the 45 minutes to the address listed in the article. Oak Valley was the most exclusive, old-money enclave in the state. The properties there weren't just houses, they were compounds. As I pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates, my modest sedan felt laughably out of place. I entered the code Mom had once mentioned for a different property we'd considered, and to my horror, the gates swung open. The driveway was even more absurd up close. It wound through perfectly manicured lawns, past a tennis court and a guest house that was larger than my entire apartment building. And then I saw the main house. It was a monument to excess, a gilded cage built with my money but designed for their dreams. I walked in through the unlocked front door. The cavernous foyer had a soaring ceiling and a crystal chandelier the size of my car. The floors were marble, and the air smelled of fresh paint and new money. I found them in the kitchen, a monstrosity of stainless steel and granite that looked like it belonged in a five-star restaurant. They were popping a bottle of champagne, laughing. They froze when they saw me, gasp. Ur's smile vanished, and my mother's face hardened. "Helen," she said, her voice cool, devoid of warmth. "I was going to call you. It was a surprise." "A surprise," I repeated, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You bought a house without me? This isn't what we discussed. This is a palace." "It's what we deserve," Jasper chimed in, puffing out his chest. "Why should we settle for less?" "Settle for less?" I looked at him, truly seeing his entitlement for the first time. "We were supposed to choose a home together, a family home, not this." My mother set her champagne flute down with a sharp click. "I made an executive decision, Helen. This property came on the market, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I knew you'd be too cautious, too sensible. You don't know how to enjoy the money you have." Her condescension was breathtaking. "Enjoy it? Mom, this is a $5 million house. That was the entire fund. What about furnishings? Taxes? Upkeep on a place like this must be astronomical." She waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be so dramatic. We'll manage. Jasper needs a place where he can feel inspired, a home that reflects our new status. I need a place where I can entertain properly. Your little apartment is fine for you, but this is a home for the Vance family legacy." The way she said, "Vance family," as if I were merely a benefactor and not a core member, was like a knife to the heart. It was clear this mansion was their kingdom, and I was just the court banker who was expected to keep quiet. "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "How could you do this behind my back?" Her expression turned to stone. "Because it was necessary. Your brother wanted a mansion, a real home where he could build his future, and I wanted to give it to him. I used the money you provided to secure our family's future, and if you don't like it, you can leave." Her words hung in the air, cold and sharp as icicles. "If you don't like it, you can leave." It wasn't an invitation, it was a dismissal, an ultimatum. I was being told that my opinion, my feelings, my very presence were conditional. I could either accept their grand betrayal in silence, or I could be exiled from the family I had worked so hard to support. In that moment, standing in the marble foyer of a house I paid for but wasn't welcome in, I felt the last vestiges of my naive trust shatter. I looked at my mother's unyielding face and my brother's smug expression. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just turned around and walked out without another word. As I closed the massive oak door behind me, the sound echoed like a final, definitive slam on a chapter of my life I now knew I had to end. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of silent fury and profound sorrow. My mother's final words, "If you don't like it, you can leave," replayed in my mind like a broken record. It was the casual cruelty of it, the absolute certainty in her voice that she held all the power, that truly broke me. She didn't see me as her daughter. She saw me as a resource to be exploited. My brother, Jasper, was no better. He stood there, champagne in hand, basking in the glory of a life he hadn't earned, one built on my labor and his sister's betrayal. When I got home, the quiet of my small apartment felt both comforting and suffocating. For hours, I just sat on my sofa, staring at the wall, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. They hadn't just bought a house. They had stolen a future. They had taken my dream of a united, secure family and twisted it into a monument to their own greed. The trust I had placed in them, the responsibility I felt for them, it had all been a weapon they used against me. The shock slowly gave way to a cold, hard resolve. They thought I would just cry, get angry, and eventually get over it. They expected me to fall back into my role as the dutiful daughter and sister, the endless font of money who would eventually accept their executive decision. They were wrong. My father had taught me many things, the value of hard work, integrity, and standing up for yourself. My mother had just taught me the most painful lesson of all: trust no one blindly, not even family. The first thing I did was check the joint account online. My stomach dropped as I saw the transaction history. Not only was the $5 million I had deposited gone, used as a cash payment for the mansion, but there were other, smaller withdrawals I hadn't noticed before. Thousands of dollars here and there over the past month. A $50,000 withdrawal labeled automobile. A $20,001 to a high-end furniture store. Another $15,000 for landscaping deposit. They hadn't just bought the house, they had immediately started outfitting their new kingdom. The total spent was closer to $5.1 million, meaning my mother had likely used her own funds to cover the immediate overages, confident she could just get more from me later. The account was now practically empty. A few $1,000s remained, probably what was left after closing costs. Seeing it all laid out in black and white, a digital ledger of their deceit extinguished any lingering sadness and replaced it with a burning, focused anger. They had left me with nothing in that account. They had drained it dry. My mind started working with the same methodical precision I applied to my scientific research. Step 1, assess the damage. Step 2, gather data. Step 3, formulate a plan. The first call I made was at 8:00 a.m. the next morning. It wasn't to my mother or brother. It was to Benjamin Carter, a top-tier financial attorney my company had recommended when I first sold the patent. I had consulted with him briefly, and he had been the one to advise setting up a formal trust. I had ignored his advice in favor of my mother's appeal to family trust. The memory made me cringe with embarrassment. "Benjamin, it's Helen Vance," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm afraid I have a serious problem, and I should have listened to you." I explained the entire situation, from opening the joint account to the discovery of the mansion. I didn't embellish or editorialize, I just gave him the cold, hard facts. He listened patiently, the silence on his end of the line punctuated only by the faint sound of him typing. When I finished, his voice was calm and professional, but I could hear a hint of steel in it. "Helen, this is a textbook case of financial elder? Well, not elder abuse, but familial financial exploitation. Your mother's name was on the account, which gives her the legal right to withdraw the funds. From a criminal standpoint, this is murky. But from a civil and financial standpoint, we have options. Serious ones." "What options?" I asked, my pen hovering over a notepad. "First and most importantly," he said, "we need to protect what you have left. We need to move all of your remaining assets into a new set of accounts at a different bank, accounts that only you can access. Then, we establish a legally airtight trust, the kind I recommended before. Your mother and brother will have no access, no influence, nothing. We are building a financial fortress, and we are locking them out. Today." The idea of taking such a decisive, aggressive step felt both terrifying and liberating. It was a declaration of war. "What about the mansion?" I asked, my voice low. "That's the second part," Benjamin said. "You paid for it in cash from a joint account. Legally, she is a co-owner of that money and therefore of the property. However, you are the sole depositor of the funds. We can file a civil suit to reclaim the assets based on a verbal agreement and intent. We'll argue that the funds were designated for a mutually agreed-upon family home, and your mother acted in bad faith, violating that agreement. It's not a slam dunk, but it's a powerful position." He paused, then added, "But before we get to lawsuits, there's something else to consider. A property of that magnitude comes with staggering overhead. Property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance for a 10-acre estate. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars a month. You said the account is empty. How, exactly, do they plan to pay for all of this?" A slow smile spread across my face for the first time in 24 hours. They didn't have a plan. Their plan was me. They assumed I would be their perpetual safety net, the one who would foot the bills for their lavish lifestyle. They had purchased a gilded cage, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. They didn't have the key to keep it running. I did, and I was about to lock the door from the outside and throw that key away. They have no other significant income, Benjamin, I said, a newfound confidence in my voice. They're completely dependent on me. Then their dream house, he replied, is about to become their nightmare. That day, I spent hours with Benjamin's team. I closed my old accounts. I moved every last penny of my fortune into a new, secure trust. I signed documents that felt like severing cords, each signature a definitive act of separation. By the end of the day, I had financially disentangled myself from my family, so completely it was as if they had never been a part of my life. My phone had been buzzing all day with texts and missed calls from my mother and Jasper. I ignored them all. Let them wonder. Let them sit in their empty palace and bask in their victory. They had no idea that their clock had started ticking. The first property tax bill would be arriving soon. The electricity bill for a 15,000-square-foot house would be astronomical. The bill for the champagne they'd been drinking was probably already in the mail. They had won the battle, but I was about to make sure they lost the war in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The days following my meeting with Benjamin were a masterclass in strategic silence. My phone was a constant barrage of communication from my family. First came the confused texts. "Helen, where are you? Call me." Then the entitled demands. "Helen, the decorators need a decision on the drapes. I need you to transfer money for the deposit." And finally, the guilt-tripping voicemails from my mother. "I don't understand why you're being so childish, Helen. We bought this beautiful home for the family, and you can't even be bothered to answer your phone. After everything I've done for you." I listened to each message with a detached sense of curiosity, like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. The complete lack of self-awareness was astounding. They genuinely believed they were the victims, that my silence was an act of petulance rather than a direct consequence of their betrayal. They couldn't conceive of a world in which I wouldn't eventually come around and resume my role as their financial provider. Meanwhile, Benjamin and I were meticulously building our case. His forensic accounting team was digging into every transaction made from the joint account since its inception. While the purchase of the mansion was the main event, the smaller transactions painted an even more insidious picture of their entitlement. They hadn't just been planning to buy a house, they had been living a life of luxury on my dime for weeks. Benjamin called me for a conference call with his lead accountant, a sharp woman named Maria. "Helen, we've mapped out the spending," Maria said, her tone all business. "Beyond the house, we've traced nearly $150,000 in additional expenditures. There's a brand new luxury SUV purchased in your brother's name. There are receipts from designer clothing stores in your mother's name. They took a weekend trip to a 5-star resort 2 weeks ago. They even hired a personal chef for what appears to be a housewarming party they were planning." Each word was a fresh stab of betrayal. A resort trip while they were lying to me about the house search, a new car for Jasper, who hadn't worked a steady job in his life. It was a systematic plundering of my generosity. "The most damning evidence we found," Benjamin interjected, "is an email chain between your mother and the realtor. We subpoenaed their records, In it, your mother explicitly states, and I quote, 'My daughter will not be involved in the final decision. We will be purchasing the property in my name and my son's. The funding is secured from a joint family account.' Hearing that was like having the air punched out of my lungs. It was premeditated. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision as my mother had claimed. She had planned to cut me out from the very beginning. She had manipulated me, lied to me, and used my love for her as leverage. "This is our smoking gun, Helen," Benjamin said gently. "This proves intent to misappropriate the funds. This isn't just a family squabble over money. This is a calculated act of financial deception. We have a very strong civil case for imposing a constructive trust on the property." A constructive trust, he explained, was a legal remedy where the court could essentially declare that although my mother and brother held the title to the house, they were holding it in trust for me, the rightful owner, because it was acquired through unjust enrichment. While the legal battle was brewing, the practical, real-world consequences were beginning to descend upon my family. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected source. A week after I had walked out of the mansion, I received an automated email notification. It was a payment reminder for the property's homeowner's insurance policy, which my mother had apparently set up with my email address as the primary contact. The annual premium was a staggering $25,000, and the first installment was due in 3 days. I deleted the email without a second thought. Then the calls started to change tone. The entitlement was replaced by a thin veneer of panic. It was Jasper who called me, his voice strained. "Helen, the groundskeeping company needs a payment card on file. Mom's card was declined. Can you just give them yours for now? We'll sort it out later." "No, Jasper, I can't," I said, my voice calm and even. There was a stunned silence on the other end. What do you mean you can't?" "I mean, my finances are no longer available to support the mansion," I replied. "What are you talking about?" he sputtered, his voice rising. "It's our house, your money bought it." "My money bought it under false pretenses," I said, the words coming easily now. "You and Mom made your choice. You wanted the mansion. Now you get to figure out how to pay for it. Goodbye, Jasper." I hung up before he could respond. The feeling was intoxicating, a potent cocktail of fear, empowerment, and justice. I was finally taking back control. The very next day, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. It was from the Oak Valley Homeowners Association. It was a welcome packet, but it also included a detailed breakdown of the quarterly dues, $8,000. The letter politely informed the new owners that failure to pay within 30 days would result in liens being placed on the property. I filed it away with the growing stack of evidence. Benjamin advised me to hold off on filing the lawsuit for another week. "Let them feel the pressure," he said. "Let them understand the reality of their situation. When they're truly desperate, they'll be more likely to see reason. Or, at the very least, they'll understand the consequences of their actions when we do make our move." He was right. My mother and brother had built their entire plan on the assumption of my infinite financial support. They had bought the car, but hadn't thought about the insurance or gas. They had bought the mansion, but hadn't considered the taxes or the electricity bill. They were like children who had wished for a castle, and now, standing in its cold, empty halls, were realizing they had no idea how to run a kingdom. They were beginning to understand that their gilded cage required a golden key, and I was the only one who had it. And I had no intention of letting them out. The 2 weeks that followed were a quiet storm. On my end, it was a period of intense legal and financial restructuring. With Benjamin's guidance, I fortified my financial world. The trust we created was named after my late father, the Edward Vance Legacy Trust. It felt right, a way to honor his memory and the principles of integrity he stood for. The trust was designed to be my sole financial entity. All my investments, my remaining liquid cash, and my future income were funneled into it. I was the primary beneficiary, and Benjamin was the trustee, a legal safeguard that made the assets virtually untouchable to outside claims without a court order. We also drafted the civil complaint. It was a thick document filled with bank statements, copies of emails, and a detailed timeline of events. It laid out a clear narrative of deception and breach of fiduciary duty. Seeing it all compiled, the case felt undeniable. It was a story of a daughter's love and generosity being systematically exploited. Holding the document in my hands, I felt a sense of validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was a victim of a profound betrayal, and I had every right to seek justice. While I was building my fortress, my family's gilded cage was beginning to crumble. Their panic was escalating daily, and I was a silent observer to their spiraling chaos. The angry voicemails had turned into desperate, pleading ones. "Helen, please," my mother's voice cracked in one message. "The electricity was shut off. It's just for the guest house and the outdoor lighting, but they're threatening to shut off the main house next. We can't live like this. This is your family." Another message from Jasper was a frantic ramble. "Helen, the HOA sent another letter. It's red this time. What does a lien mean? Is that bad? "Mom is a mess, you have to call us back. This is all a misunderstanding." They still didn't get it. They thought this was a temporary problem, a negotiating tactic on my part. They believed that if they just begged enough or guilted me enough, I would crack and the money would start flowing again. What they failed to grasp was that the well was dry and I was the one who had sealed it shut. The turning point came when my aunt called me. She was my mother's younger sister, a kind, no-nonsense woman who had always been a peripheral but stable presence in my life. "Helen, your mother called me in tears," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "She said you've cut her off, that she and Jasper are going to lose the house. What on earth is going on?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. I didn't spare any details: the secret purchase, the lies, the "if you don't like it, you can leave" ultimatum, the evidence of their spending spree. I told her about the fortress I had built around my finances. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When my aunt finally spoke, her voice was filled with a weary disappointment I knew was directed at her sister. "I see," she said quietly. "Rebecca always did have a penchant for drama and a sense of entitlement a mile wide. I'm so sorry, Helen. I'm so sorry she put you through this." Her validation was a balm on a wound I didn't realize was still so raw. "What do I do?" I asked her, the question genuine. "You do what you have to do to protect yourself," she said firmly. "You earned that money. You don't owe them a lifestyle they didn't build. Family is supposed to lift you up, not drag you down to fund their fantasies." That conversation solidified my resolve. I was on the right path. The next day, Benjamin informed me that the first quarterly property tax bill for the mansion had been issued. For a $5 million property in that county, it was just over $30,000. It was due in 60 days, but penalties would start accruing after 30. This was the real ticking clock. Utilities and HOA fees were annoyances. Property taxes were a non-negotiable debt to the government. Failure to pay would lead to foreclosure, a slow but certain process that would strip them of the house. Benjamin proposed our next move. "It's time to serve them the lawsuit," he said. "They're feeling the financial squeeze. They're realizing you're serious. Now we show them just how serious. We're not just cutting them off, we're coming to reclaim what is rightfully yours." He explained the strategy. The lawsuit would give them a clear choice. They could either fight us in court, a battle they would almost certainly lose and couldn't afford to wage, or they could sign the house over to a trust controlled by me. "And what do I do with it then?" I asked. The thought of owning that monstrous monument to their greed made my stomach churn. "You sell it," he said simply. "You take the money, you put it back in your trust, and you wash your hands of the entire affair. You'll likely take a small loss after commissions and fees, but you'll have recovered the vast majority of your capital, and more importantly, your freedom." The plan was perfect. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about restitution. It was about undoing the damage and closing this chapter of my life for good. That afternoon, I gave Benjamin the green light. A process server was dispatched. He was instructed to deliver one copy of the lawsuit to the grand, ridiculous mansion in Oak Valley, addressed to Rebecca and Jasper Vance. The confrontation was no longer going to be a shouting match in a marble foyer. It was going to be a legal battle, fought on my terms, with the full weight of the law behind me. The 5-day countdown they didn't even know they were on had just begun. The lawsuit was served on a Wednesday. I imagined the scene vividly. The uniformed process server walking up the ridiculously long driveway, the confusion on my mother's or brother's face as they accepted the thick envelope, the dawning horror as they read the legal jargon and understood its implication. They were being sued. By me. Their reaction was instantaneous and explosive. My phone lit up with a fusillade of calls. And texts, a digital tantrum of epic proportions. I didn't answer. Instead, I listened to the voicemails later that evening, a detached chronicler of their descent into panic. "A lawsuit, a lawsuit," my mother shrieked in the first message, her voice a ragged edge of disbelief and fury. "How dare you? After everything I've done for you, after I raised you, you sick a lawyer on your own mother. "This is insane, Helen. You are trying to make us homeless. You call this off right now, you hear me? Right now." Jasper's message was a panicked, pleading mess. "Helen, what is this? Constructive trust? Misappropriation? These are crazy words. We can't afford a lawyer to fight this. Mom is losing it. You can't do this to us. We're family, just turn the money back on and we can make this all go away. We can talk about it. Please, Helen, we're sorry, just call us." That was the first time I had heard the word sorry. But it was a hollow apology, born not of remorse but of terror. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. They were sorry their golden goose had not only stopped laying eggs, but was now actively trying to take the whole farm back. Benjamin had prepared me for this. "They'll try to manipulate you emotionally," he had warned. "Don't engage. Any communication from this point forward goes through me. You are not to speak with them directly." I followed his instructions to the letter. When my mother sent a long, rambling email that swung wildly between threats of disownment and tearful appeals to my father's memory, I forwarded it to Benjamin without a reply. When Jasper sent a picture of them both looking haggard in the giant, soulless kitchen of the mansion, I deleted it. 2 days later, on Friday, Benjamin received a call. It was from a lawyer my mother had managed to find, likely a local attorney who was in way over his head. He was blustering, Benjamin recounted to me later. Tried to argue it was a gift, that Helen was a disgruntled daughter throwing a fit. I calmly walked him through the evidence. I mentioned the email where your mother stated her intent to exclude you from the purchase. I mentioned the forensic accounting of their spending spree. I faxed him a copy of the email chain. His tone changed very quickly. Benjamin then laid out our offer, which was really a non-negotiable demand. "Your clients have 2 options," he had told the other lawyer. "Option A, you fight us in court. We will file for an immediate injunction to freeze the property, you'll rack up legal fees you can't pay, and we will win. We'll get the house, and we will sue for legal costs. Your clients will walk away with nothing but a massive debt. Option B, your clients sign a quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of the property to the Edward Vance Legacy Trust. In return, the trust will not pursue them for the additional $150,000 they spent, nor for legal fees. They will be allowed to remove their personal belongings, and that will be the end of it. They have until Monday at 5:00 p.m. to accept. This offer is final." It was a brilliant move. It gave them an out, but a humbling one. They could escape financial ruin, but only by admitting complete and total defeat. They would have to willingly sign away the mansion that was the symbol of their arrogance. The weekend must have been agonizing for them. I imagined them rattling around in that enormous, dark house, the bills piling up, the threat of legal annihilation hanging over their heads. They had built their dream on a foundation of sand, and the tide was coming in with ferocious speed. They were trapped in their palace, prisoners of their own greed. On Monday morning, my mother tried to circumvent the lawyers one last time. She showed up at my apartment building. My doorman, who had been given strict instructions, called me. "There's a Rebecca Vance here to see you, Ms. Vance. She seems very upset." "Do not let her up," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Please inform her that she needs to direct all communication to my attorney, Mr. Carter." I watched from my window as she stood on the sidewalk, looking up at my building, her face a mask of desperation. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something, not pity, but a deep, sorrowful ache for the mother I thought I had, the one I had loved and trusted. That woman was gone, replaced by a stranger who had tried to ruin me for a house. I turned away from the window. At 4:45 p.m. on Monday, just 15 minutes before the deadline, Benjamin called me. "They folded," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Their lawyer just called. They'll sign. He's sending over the executed quitclaim deed by courier." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. It was over. I had won. "They had one request," Benjamin added. "They want a week to move their things out." I thought about it for a moment. I could have said no. I could have demanded they be out in 24 hours, but my goal was not cruelty, it was justice. It was about severing the ties and recovering what was mine. Fine, I said, give them a week. And Benjamin, I added, thank you. You did the hard part, Helen, he replied. You stood your ground. 5 days after the process server had knocked on their door, my mother and brother had lost everything. They had lost the mansion, they had lost their access to my money, and most importantly, they had lost any claim they had left to my life. They had been given a final warning, an ultimatum, and they had been forced to bow to the consequences. The gilded cage was mine now, and the first order of business was to dismantle it, piece by piece. The week they were given to move out was, I'm sure, the longest week of their lives. I didn't go to the mansion. I didn't want to see them, and I certainly had no desire to set foot in that house again while they occupied it. Benjamin arranged for a representative from a real estate company to be present on the final day to collect the keys and ensure the property was vacated. The report I got back was grimly satisfying. They had left in a small moving truck, the kind you rent for a one-bedroom apartment. All the opulent furniture they had bought was gone, likely returned for whatever cash they could get. The luxury SUV Jasper was so proud of was also gone, presumably repossessed or sold at a steep loss. They had taken only their personal belongings, leaving the vast, empty mansion echoing with the ghost of their failed aspirations. The realtor Benjamin hired was a powerhouse. We'll list it as an opportunity, she said briskly. Unforeseen circumstances forcing a quick sale. We'll price it aggressively to move it fast. Better to take a small hit and liquidate than let it sit on the market. True to her word, the house sold in less than a month. After commissions and closing costs, the net proceeds were deposited back into my trust. The total financial loss from the entire ordeal was about $300,000, a sum that was, in the grand scheme of my new financial reality, an acceptable price to pay for my freedom and peace of mind. I considered it the most expensive and most valuable lesson I would ever learn. With the mansion sold and the money recovered, a profound quiet settled over my life. The constant barrage of texts and calls had stopped. The drama was over. I was left in the silence, and in that silence, I had to figure out who I was without the self-imposed burden of my family's keeper. About a month after the sale closed, I got a call from my aunt. I thought you should know, she began, her tone gentle. Rebecca and Jasper are living with me for now. They had nowhere else to go. She told me my mother was a shell of her former self, bitter and defeated. She spent her days railing against my betrayal, refusing to accept any responsibility for her own actions. Jasper had taken a job at a local coffee shop, the barista part of his old job description now a full-time reality. His artistic ambitions were on hold indefinitely. They had lost not just the house, but their pride and their place in the world. They had gambled everything on my compliance, and their loss was total. Your mother keeps saying she wants to talk to you, my aunt said. She thinks she can still fix this. There's nothing to fix, I replied, the words feeling true and absolute. She made her choice in that kitchen. She chose a house over her daughter. I'm just living with the consequences of her decision. I did, however, do one final thing. Through Benjamin, I set up a small, anonymous annuity for my mother. It was enough to cover basic living expenses for a modest apartment, ensuring she wouldn't be truly destitute in her old age. It was a gesture made not out of love or forgiveness, but out of a sense of detached duty. It was for my father's memory, not for her. The annuity was managed by the bank and was non-negotiable. She could never ask for more, and she would never know it came from me. Jasper got nothing. He was young and able-bodied. It was time for him to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. The begging my family promised in the title of my story did come, but not in the way you might expect. It wasn't a dramatic scene on my doorstep. It came in a crumpled, tear-stained letter from my mother that my aunt passed along to me. It was a long, rambling apology, filled with excuses and self-pity. It ended with a simple, desperate plea. I just want my family back. I need your help, Helen. I need my daughter. I read the letter, folded it neatly, and put it away in a box of things I no longer needed. She didn't want her daughter back. She wanted the security and comfort her daughter provided. She didn't miss me, she missed my money. The consequences of her greed weren't just the loss of a mansion. It was the loss of a son's respect and a daughter's love. She was left with what she had created, an empty life, echoing with the choices she had made. Today, my life is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's not the silence of loneliness, but the peace of solitude. I've reconnected with friends, I've started traveling, and I've poured my energy back into my work, where I'm leading a new project that could change lives. I am building a future on a foundation of my own making, one based on earned trust and mutual respect. The ghosts of the mansion in Oak Valley no longer haunt me. They are just a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family, and for yourself, is to walk away.